The intolerant left has engaged in an aggressive campaign to silence and intimidate speakers they disagree with. Consider the scene at the City University of New York Law School, where angry left-wing students shouted down a free speech advocate.
Thank you very much to CUNY for having me.
CUNY is not having you. This is white men and those who support white supremacy.
And then the answer is to change the law.
Why don't you support people? Why don't you support
the law, right? That's a very good thing. You are in law school, right? And it's a bizarre thing to say the law when you're in law school.
Yeah, and when they're not silencing conservatives, they're threatening to attack them. Movie star Robert De Niro calls Trump the lowlife in chief. And in the past, he said this.
This idiot is the president. The guy is a fool. Come on. Of course I want to punch him in the face.
Right. Yes.
Bring it on, baby. Then there's the glee the left expressed online. At the news of Barbara Bush's deaths, Jen Spira, who's a writer for Stephen Colbert, tweeted, "R.I.P. Barbara Bush, the only woman who was 92 for 30 years. Professor Randa Jarrah of Fresno State tweeted, "Barbara Bush was a generous and smart and amazing racist who, along with her husband, raised a war criminal. F out of here with your nice words." Josh Blackman is the professor you just saw who was shouted down at the law school, and he joins us tonight. Josh, you were giving a speech on free speech, and the position of your opponents is that free speech now is just another example of white supremacy, white privilege, white nationalism, and all the rest of it.
Exactly. I tried to come on campus to talk about free speech, and I was shouted down. They yelled at me, they screamed at me, they called me a fascist, a white supremacist, a Nazi, and they were not interested to hear what I have to say was that free speech is important. The irony is they're protesting free speech by shouting down my speech.
They're also becoming more and more snarlingly inarticulate. I mean, we had law students here paying for an expensive education who were pretty white themselves by comparison with the demographic population outside the doors of their privileged law school, and they're shouting F the law at you. Those of us who have been in American courtrooms always reach that point at a certain stage of the proceedings, but it's odd to find law students doing this, isn't it?
You know, Mark, I feel bad for these students. I can't imagine if they go to court and say, "Your Honor, may it please the court, F the law." Right? And in a couple of years, these people might be judges. What is our future? What is our law when these people go on the bench? It petrifies me of what they're learning in class.
Yeah, it's like the next stage after jury nullification. It's like the whole legal fabric nullification. Let me ask you the big picture question here, because you go to a lot of campuses. You're not a white supremacist, you're not a Nazi, you're not a fascist as far as... I'm not going to ask what you were doing in 1933 to 1945. But I sense among people under 50, under 40, certainly by the time you get to students, that free speech has less and less purchase on this generation, and it's simply not a value for many, if not most of them.
You're exactly right. There's a generational shift. People came of age during the 70s and the 60s, understand that free speech is important to protest war. But today's generation thinks free speech is a shield for supremacy, and a shield for fascism. And they don't understand why free speech is important. And that's why I was there. I wanted to engage them in a discussion, and when I tried to engage them, they filed out of the room. They couldn't handle the truth.
And what's interesting to me is that university administrators and the police forces at their disposal actually often wind up giving the protesters, in effect, a violent form of the heckler's veto. They don't push back, and they don't ensure that you're able to speak.
Exactly. If you watch the video, they were standing inches over my shoulder. They were doing this for 8 or 9 minutes. They were given a warning. There was no discipline. And in fact, the dean of the law school defended these students who said they were engaging in a reasonable protest. Yeah. Mark, this was not a reasonable protest.
You're right. We have to break it there, Josh. Thanks very much. This is a Fox News.